Amyloid plaques in the brain are the first sign of Alzheimer's disease. Beta amyloid proteins clump together to form the sticky, toxic plaques scattered throughout the brain in Alzheimer's. Proteins start accumulating up to 2 decades before cognitive symptoms such as memory loss and confusion arise. The beta amyloid protein is a target for emerging drug therapies to reduce or remove plaques to treat the disease. But there is also another protein that defines Alzheimer's disease called tau.
A lot of interest has been focused on tau recently because of the realization that tau seems to be the executor or the effector of Alzheimer's disease. Whereas we think amyloid plaques sets up the possibility to get Alzheimer's, but then two, you need the tau tangles to manifest the clinical aspects of the disease.
Dr. Randall Bateman, professor of neurology at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, has a laboratory dedicated to the causes, diagnosis, and future treatments of Alzheimer's disease. He is now leading a global effort to advance new drugs targeting the tau protein.
Tau is the main part of tangles that form inside the neurons, the thinking cells of the brain. So this tau protein that makes up the tangles is a key target in Alzheimer's disease treatment trials. Recent developments have allowed researchers to develop drugs which target tau to lower down the way that tau causes damage to the brain.
Dr. Bateman is the director of the Dominantly Inherited Alzheimer's Network Trials Unit, and he is principal investigator for this global network's Phase 2 clinical trial called the Tau Next Generation Trials that's introducing new drugs targeting tau proteins.
Clinical trial to test new drugs in development to determine if they can slow or reverse this tau tangle pathology that builds up in the brain. Now, tau is a normal protein. It exists in all of our cells, inside our nervous system, inside the neurons, the thinking cells of the brain. And what happens, though, is it misfolds and it aggregates and it has changes that make it toxic, make it damaging to the neurons, make them sick. And so the goal of these treatments is to target tau in a way to either reverse or prevent it from misfolding and making these tangles in the brain.
The clinical trials are designed for patients and family members of dominantly inherited Alzheimer's disease. This is a rare form of Alzheimer's from genetic mutations that people inherit from their parents.
Enroll people who have these mutations and these families, these very rare families that cause Alzheimer's disease, typically at a young age, in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And it is a global trial. It will happen at more than 40 centers throughout the world in North and South America, Europe, Asia, Australia.
The trials will investigate what Bateman calls anti-tau tangle drugs. They will focus on 3 different drugs with clinical trials this year, then next year, and the third clinical trial expected in 2023. The research team will choose from 2 classes of tau drugs that act in different ways. This includes small molecule drugs that inhibit tau aggregation and genetic treatments that reduce the production of the tau protein.
Each one independently tested to see what effects we could have on tau by hitting different targets. But what kind of drug is able to effectively slow, stop, or reverse tau pathology. And that's one of the main goals of this study, is that as we launch these tau drug arms, we hope to figure that out. As I said, we'll be using 3 different kinds of drugs to help figure that out. The other thing we need to figure out is we need to figure out when to use the drug. So do we need to treat people when symptoms begin, before symptoms begin? Both? We don't know yet. And so this trial will help address that.
The first of the 3 experimental drugs is now used in the first clinical trial, enrolling more than 200 people.
What we've announced is the first one is going to be this anti-tau antibody. And so it is a special protein, an antibody, that's been specifically designed to target a very specific form of tau, a kind of tau that we believe has a role in tau toxicity and aggregation. And what the DIAN-2 trial will do is then use this drug for people who have the highest risk of Alzheimer's disease, people who carry mutations and are certainly going to get the disease or already have the symptoms of the disease, and treat them with this drug or a placebo. And the goal here is for us to try to figure out how much does this drug slow down, prevent, or reverse tau pathology, and ultimately can it slow down the clinical symptoms of Alzheimer's disease.
This trial will last 2 years to see if the drug can slow, prevent, or reverse tau tangles that build up in the brain.
And ultimately, over 4 years, whether it can slow the cognitive loss and the clinical decline that occurs as part of dementia. And so this is an experimental treatment. It's not used in patients. These are new drugs that have been developed. Very few people in the world have been exposed to these kind of drugs.
Although the trial focuses on people with rare mutations, drugs that are successful in this population would be promising candidates for preventing or treating late onset or sporadic Alzheimer's disease that occurs more commonly in older adults. The destructive molecular and cellular processes in the brain are similar in all types of the disease.
With so much heartache involved for those who are suffering from Alzheimer's disease and for their families, how does the clinical trial offer hope?
So I am very hopeful, and I'm excited by the potential to target tau. It clearly is a major player. So we're all pushing as hard and as quickly as we can because patients and families really, we're racing against the clock here. We're out of time. And we need to get these things going as quickly as possible. It takes time for us to treat people and monitor and watch the disease over time in order to see if there's an effect. We are racing, we're at the forefront of doing this, and I think we can have a significant impact in being able to bring it forward.